Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Kaleidoscope, the new Differing Minds podcast full of raw, powerful stories about race, neurodiversity, and intersectionality. I'm Jess, I'm CEO of Differing Minds and the host of this new Kaleidoscope podcast. My pronouns are she, her, and as a white cis woman, I really want to use the privilege that I have to raise voices of others and enable us all to learn from them by hearing their stories, which started for me when I hosted a webinar back in May of this year on a very similar topic, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive and so many kind of calls for more of these stories to be heard. So I'm so excited and privileged to be able to host this. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Aditi Gangrade for an episode all about her experience as an Indian neurodivergent woman. Aditi is a 25-year-old film director and writer. Her pronouns are she, her, and she is autistic, has ADHD and PMDD. She is the co-founder of Much Spectrum, an inclusive storytelling, content and insights wing of Much Media. She's based in India and is working on mainstream stories and representation of mental health, neurodiversity and disability through her company. She's worked with many brands, including Netflix, Instagram, Google, Coca-Cola Foundation, Save the Children and more. Aditi is an intersectional feminist and is passionate about intersectional storytelling and representation of disability in media. One of the films Aditi directed, Unmasking Autism, was recently screened at the Prime Filmtage Bremen Film Festival in Germany. Aditi, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Oh, you are so
I'm really
welcome.
excited too.
I think we're going to have a brilliant chat today. And just so everyone's aware, so we are looking at around about a 30-minute episode to hear all about Aditi and her experience. So Aditi, tell me about, I mentioned a little bit about your neurodivergence and your identity, but tell me about how you came to understand your identity.
So I'll give you a bit of my background. I have grown up in a tier 2 city in India, and I was undiagnosed and unidentified throughout my childhood. Just last year, I discovered that I'm autistic ADHD, and basically, childhood was uh, really like something because my dad had a transferable job and I almost lived in 6 cities in India, and I always lived in this state called Madhya Pradesh, and in a non-urban setting, and I've been to some 9 schools throughout my childhood, and then
Wow.
finally settled in Indore, but I never really realized why I always felt different. And it was after my partner discovered that he's neurodivergent, I thought that I might be ADHD, but I never thought that I might be autistic because everything that I saw on the internet and all the lived experiences were mainly of white men. And after I started reading more about autistic women's experiences and non-binary people's experiences, that is when I sort of started relating more with autism. And then after like lots and lots of research, I came to this conclusion that okay, I'm autistic and also ADHD. About my career, I'm a filmmaker, and I've always been inclined towards social filmmaking. And mental health is something that I really wanted to pursue all my life, and that is why this like after discovering my neurodivergent identity, I'm more inclined to uh, know more about intersectional lived experiences, people who are neurodivergent, how their mental health is, and people with various different kinds of genders and different kinds of races and other intersectionalities. So yeah, after discovering that I'm autistic and ADHD, we decided to start this content and insights wing, which is called Much Spectrum. And there were really like there was a major dearth of Indian lived experiences on the internet, and on different platforms, and we thought that okay, this could be a gap that we could come in and fill. And now we focus on different kinds of lived experiences of people across India and in other parts of the world as well.
It's amazing. I love it, and that's how I first came across you because I was following much spectrum, and I think it's so neat. You're absolutely right. There was a gap. You are filling that gap, but like you said, so much work to do really to kind of share those kind of stories with everybody. And so, uh, can you talk a little bit about how you think kind of culture or your cultural experience impacted your experience as a neurodivergent person?
So, unlike the West, uh, which is very individualistic and it focuses on the person themselves, South Asian culture is a bit different. So it's collectivist. We thrive on setting molds for people, and I mean, in India, I mean, there's also this herd mentality that okay, if 10 of your friends or 10 other peers are pursuing something, you should also go do that. So that happens a lot here out in India, and children are matlab, when I was growing, uh, I was always taught that okay, these are the rules, these are the social conduct, and this is how you need to behave when you are with relatives. This is how you need to behave when you are with friends or when you are in school. And there are these strict restrictions around girls, especially, that it's really limiting. And I mean, you're expected to fit into the same molds that the generation before you had to fit in. And I mean, India is big on culture. There's this word we use. It's called sanskar, and sanskar means culture. And you have to be cultured here in India. You are expected to be that way. You are expected to be sanskari. And as a neurodivergent kid, I mean, a lot of traditions didn't really make sense to me uh, because they were really outdated. Some were really patriarchal, and I never resonated with any of that. And thankfully, my parents also didn't believe in a lot of things, so that was like quite a blessing there. Um, I mean, growing up as an Indian girl, you are just expected to get all the rules, and I mean, I never got anything, so to speak, because yeah, it's as a neurodivergent person, you think that okay, you will be told certain things, but the things that you're told really doesn't sit well with you. So that always happened. Also about India, the neurodiversity movement has recently begun uh, to take off. The neurodiversity movement, led by neurodivergent people, has recently took off, and thanks to all the self advocates, because till now our stories are being told by neurotypical people, and now recently that has changed. So so yeah, that's one thing. And about the law that's here in India, there's RPWD Act of 2016, which is there for people with disabilities. But I mean, it's not widely implemented. People like us, people who are late discovered, or people who are on the different side of the spectrum, are not really acknowledged by the system. So I think there are these major gaps in the Indian system, so to speak. And the gaps are that we are not really understood. There's no data. Um, there's no understanding, there's no vocabulary, and vocabulary also comes with privilege. So people who are living in cities like Mumbai or Bangalore, the metropolitan cities, they still understand what exactly mental health is or what neurodiversity is. But in the cities that I have grown up in, I mean, even mental health is something that is really stigmatized. Things I mean, when we talk about autism, it's really demonized and infantilized. Uh, so, so yeah. awareness is something that's really lacking.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you talk about it, because I think whoever you speak to who is an advocate of the neurodiversity movement anywhere in the globe, and whatever identity they have, will say that we're at the beginning and there's so much work to do, but there is such a difference across cultures and geographies and race. So, it's I guess we have to be grateful to some degree as white people, and for me living in the UK, that we are further ahead, and it's still really difficult, but then it's so much harder for other people. And it was interesting hearing you talk about your family, actually, because I've spoken to quite a few Indian people living in the UK who say that, kind of older generations and their parents, for example, find it really difficult to accept, or they can't talk to them about it, or it's just viewed very negatively, kind of being autistic or being neurodivergent, and that's just, it is very hard. And I think that is across race as well, with in terms of different age groups, but it's especially difficult when you throw in that cultural aspect that you mentioned. But I'd love to hear your perspective, given what you do and what you're passionate about, kind of your perspective on the role of media in all of this, in the neurodiversity movement, and how that's impacted across cultures.
So, media plays a very important role because, I mean, you start behaving in a way that aligns with media, right? You watch a film and you're like, okay, I want to be like that person. When you're a kid, you expect watching people who are like you. And I mean, I never saw any kind of representation of a kid or even an adult who resonated even like 2 or 3% with how I was. So that was something that I always wished. Like after my discovery, I always wanted that, okay, if I would have seen someone who was like me, I would have realized it much earlier. So you look at the print media in India, they still use words like this person is suffering from autism or suffering with autism. Uh, People with neurodivergent conditions, people with disabilities are called people with special needs. And I mean, in general, the terminology that is used is really not in line with how neurodivergent people look at themselves. So, I mean, that is the print media is lacking there. uh, you look at Indian ads, there's still, I mean, there's disability representation. Yes, there last year there was this beautiful ad by KFC Shamata. KFC is a brand. KFC Shamata is an initiative started by KFC here in India, and they are working a lot with people who are deaf, and they hire people. They hire deaf people and hard of hearing people, which is great. But neurodiversity is something that is not yet explored in the advertising industry in India. Now you look at brands like Pantene, you look at McDonald's, Vanish, and Google and Apple. All of these brands, their counterparts in the US and UK and Australia, are working a lot in the neurodiversity space. But I mean, because the Indian system and the Indian culture, it has not yet sort of tried to understand neurodiversity, and we are not there in terms of accommodations and advocacy. That's why, I mean, the advertising industry is also not yet exploring the neurodivergent stories and the lived experiences of neurodivergent people. Indian films have a decent neurodiversity representation, but what we've seen in the past 10 to 12 years is that neurodivergent people are not hired for roles uh, which are about neurodivergent people. So mostly neurotypical people or able-bodied actors play these roles. Recently, some of the films have started hiring neurodivergent consultants, which is uh, like a great step forward. But I mean, this is something that I always feel that, okay, if a Pantene UK can be so ahead in the neurodiversity discourse, they should really, like, it should trickle down to India as well soon.
Yeah, it's so true. And we talked, didn't we, before about like um Vanish and the work that's done in the UK and the adverts that's come out, which is amazing. But that, like you said, doesn't go through globally. That's just been a kind of UK thing, and it shouldn't just be a UK thing. And I think it probably, well, I don't know what your perspective on this is, but I wonder if brands are waiting for cultures to be ready because obviously they have a lot at stake, and they've probably done these kind of things in the UK because there is a positive movement. There's lots of people that can get behind it, but it's a bit of a risk to try and do that somewhere where there's still a lot of work to do. But you need those brands to be leading the way because someone needs to be, like you said, kind of representing and creating that change. um, and it's not just going to happen. It would take these, imagine if a few huge global brands got behind this and did it, you know in India, for example, and really started to lead that way. But it feels like that could be really positive, but I'm not sure is something that is imminent.
I mean, I completely agree with your point that they have a lot on stake, and given the kind of stigma that's there in India, some of the brands definitely do hesitate to even address these topics. But I mean, the gap is because of data, right? Because I mean, we the data that we have currently of disabled people is from 2011. So that's
Oh,
that's yeah.
wow.
So that's
Wow.
a big gap.
That's shocking. Do you know why that is? Is there a push to do kind of more up to date
I mean,
analysis?
every time it's about people with disabilities, uh, there I mean, the system always finds some or the other excuse, because recently there was some data released of people with disabilities, and I mean, it was just their disability that was mentioned. Other parts of their identity, their gender, their sexuality, and other parts of your identity are not mentioned in that data. So that is one thing. Another thing is also because of the stigma that exists in people. So a lot of families, when you go to them, so we recently had this chat with a parent, and he said that so many parents don't even mention that they have a disabled child or a neurodivergent child in their family. So that also sort of prevents having the correct data. But yeah, with respect to UDID cards, we have UDID cards in here for people with disabilities, and I mean, there are no such sort of accommodations or services for disabled people, uh, and even for the ones that we do have, they don't really function really well, because when you go to get a UDID card, you have to sit for 4 to 5 hours to just get a UDID card. Now, if there's a person with disability, is how are they expected to even like go and sit there for 4 hours, and like it's not possible for a person. And
Yeah.
there are so many unfortunate stories where people have gone, parents have visited to get these UDID cards, and I mean, it's just that it it's really, the system is broken for people with disabilities. But there's like a silver lining, because even though media and everyone else are not really understanding all these parts about disabled people, are not we don't have like data as such, but Supreme Court of India, and I mean, the judicial system is taking big leaps forward, because we have this Chief Justice of India, CJI Chandrachud, who is really doing good work for at least the courts of India.
Good. I mean, with a big challenge and a kind of, yeah, uh, a gap in, like you said, data and access to services, obviously there is a big opportunity to change. So hopefully that, you know, it's just so interesting hearing you talk because I hear from so many people in the UK who, are are white and don't have all of these issues from a cultural or a race perspective, but still are like, we have got so far to go in the UK. So it's just, when you can start going, it will change things. And I know one of the things that we spoke about before was social media, and I know that you think that could really help to change things. So tell me more about that, and the role that you think that's playing in this movement.
Actually, I want to add something to your previous question. You asked
Yeah, please
why
do.
brands are not yet um really doing something in this space. And I mean, they could start with even the smallest things, like doing a small research is something that they could start with. Maybe if they don't want to put it out there in the world that okay, we are doing something about neurodivergent stories or disabled stories in India, they could maybe start with research, or they could do small campaigns. They could start with hiring, or I mean, it always comes from the upper management, right? So the upper management needs to be sensitized, and the company's culture needs to be in line with the ethical norms. And then maybe they can, I mean, I understand that it's always like small steps in, but I mean, the step has to start, it has to start somewhere. So I think research could be something that a lot of brands can start exploring. There's terminology, I mean, India has so many regional languages. There's no word for neurodiversity, neurodivergence, autism in Hindi, in other languages like Marathi and Kannada.
Wow.
There are so many languages. They could just have these terminologies, like sort of explained in these different languages. This could be a big thing for India.
It's such a good point. I mean, any brands who are watching this, like, you are, that is exactly what people could do. So it's not, you don't need to just do some huge campaign and make it really overt. You can do some, in theory, smaller things that can have a huge impact. Like you said, research, gather data, support some understanding in language, and creating some terms, like so many smaller projects that can also present brands with a big opportunity to show that they're doing the right thing as well. But I think, yeah, I would love to see a brand. Let's be honest, huge global brands, they do have a lot at stake, but really they are, so many of them are so well established that they can't, unless they really do this poorly, even going into a culture where it's not that well accepted, they're not, people aren't going to suddenly stop buying Coke, are they? Or, they will be, or McDonald's, like, they would be fine, but it would create such a huge stand and like really help with the movement. So yeah, I think so many things that they can do, and I hope to see it soon. So yeah, thanks for adding that. And then, like, let's pop to social media, as I mentioned, and talk about the impact you think that that's having and the role that it's got to play.
So social media has really decentralized and democratized advocacy, because till now we didn't have like big platforms to advocate or to tell disabled stories of disabled people and neurodivergent people. But through social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these platforms, and even TikTok. TikTok is not here in India, but I mean, I love the content uh, that's out there from the US, UK, and Australia. So yeah, I mean, social media has really decentralized that power, and so many neurodivergent people, people who are autistic, ADHD, and dyslexic, and people with all kinds of different kinds of intersectionalities are now feeling comfortable to come out and talk about their neurodivergent identities. They can find communities online. On our community, in this past 1.5 years, we've been able to grow a community of 33,000 people. And I mean, on every post, there's there's so much love, and there are so many conversations happening. People are connecting with each other, they are making friends. And in our DMs also, people ask these questions that okay, I'm going for a job interview tomorrow, should I disclose my disability? So even having someone to talk to is, I think, many of us didn't have that even 2 or 3 years ago. So social media has given us that community and sort of feeling of belonging, because I mean, if when I was growing up, if I had like a place where I could see and meet other people and watch their stories, I my life would have been like really different. My sort of discovery would have happened much earlier, I think. So social media has given that power, and now a lot of nonprofits are also nonprofits who are neuroaffirming and who are in line with the neurodivergent people's discourse, and the neurodiversity movement are partnering with a lot of creators. We at Much Much Spectrum work with a lot of nonprofits, and I mean, this past 1 year, people who are hiring neurodivergent people now are also interested in having social media campaigns and talking about these things on social media, as opposed to like 10 years ago when it was still stigmatized and nobody wanted to talk about it, because I mean, I always thought that if I talk about why I'm different, or how I am different, people would maybe make fun of me, or uh, I would not look cool in front of my friends. So, I mean, that's changing, and that's because of all the self advocates and caregivers and so many other people who are talking about these things online. You are doing such great
Yeah,
work.
I mean,
I mean, I love your LinkedIn posts. Every post that you share,
oh,
I
thank you.
always make it a point to share it on our team group. So it's always something that, oh, Jess has shared something, and we love reading it, and it's always so nuanced. And I mean, there is something like there is this community. Even finding you and finding other creators on LinkedIn is has really changed our lives, because now we talk about these things. Earlier we didn't have any words to talk about these feelings, or what our experiences, things that we are experiencing in our day-to-day life.
Well, I mean, and I feel exactly the same. So I think so many people can be really negative about many parts of social media, and they do exist. Like they absolutely exist. Um, but for me, I think in this context and from a neurodiversity point of view, the positives far outweigh the negatives. And I just totally don't buy into the narrative around more people think that they're neurodivergent because of social media. I 100% think that more people realize their own identity as a neurodivergent person because of social media. And it's actually like life changing for people, it's life saving for people. And the fact that in such a short space of time you've grown your community to over 30,000 people just shows how needed it is and how kind of positive and powerful it can be for people. And you know that goes across all identities as you talked about, but is potentially more important and more powerful for, you know, communities and cultures like yours, because when the narrative is so different to how it should be or how it really is in people's heads, you need people sharing their own lived experience, so that other people can, like you said, relate to it. And the fact that you say that, you know, your life, your childhood would have been different if you had had that kind of information just shows why we have to keep doing this work. And you know, advocates should definitely share things on social media, because we can change lives for children, and affect future generations. And I think you are absolutely doing that work, and that's why I love what you're doing. And as you know, we share a huge passion for, you know, video and that form of media for sharing information and for telling stories and for inspiring people. So yeah, I think it's so powerful. And do you think, last question, I know we're running out of time, but do you think you're I assume you kind of looked at social media when you were going through the process of kind of identifying yourself, and obviously I know you mentioned your partner, but I suppose perhaps without your partner and without social media you wouldn't be where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we looked at social media, like after my partner's discovery, he was reading this book called Neurotypes, and he was like, okay, this is my childhood explained in this book. And I started looking up autism and ADHD and dyslexia, and I found a lot of creators from the US on Twitter, and Twitter and Reddit actually. So Reddit also, I mean, there are these long conversations happening about someone's hyperfocus or about some rant about someone's employer or something like that. So I mean, uh, social media also helped us understand the 360-degree picture of what exactly it is like to live as a neurodivergent person. So many people ask us, I mean, in some of the previous interviews that we have had, someone asked us, do you think that you might have misdiagnosed or misidentified yourself? My partner is officially diagnosed. I am self-identified. So a lot of people do ask that because they think that okay, someone has just scrolled through reels or through TikTok videos and they've come to the conclusion that they are autistic or they are ADHD. But they don't. What they don't see is the months and months of research and uh, the effort that goes into finding that okay, you relate with these things and it's not just some quirk or some part that okay, because you walk this way or because you are clumsy you are ADHD. It's not that. It's a lot more. And yeah, I think that requires another separate chat sometime.
It does. Definitely. I mean, I could talk for hours about that. I think you're so right. I mean, I get it all the time. And I just say to people, neurodiversity or being neurodivergent is not destigmatized enough yet, and it's not quirky enough yet in mainstream for people to want to identify as
Yeah.
that if it's not their identity. Like, we're not all going around thinking, oh, I'm going to attach myself to that label because it sounds really fun. Like, in our bubble maybe of neurodivergent advocates, it can seem really great, but you step outside into the real world and you soon realize that it's not how people view it. So trust me, people won't want to identify as neurodivergent if they don't feel like that they are that way. So
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for joining us, Aditi. Final question: where can people find out more about you and more about what you do?
You can find us on YouTube, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Yeah, Twitter also. So we do a lot of social campaigns and social media content, and also long form films. We're actually writing a film, a fiction film. So yeah, we are doing lots of different
Wow.
things, and we are also working to reach out to brands to also sort of educate them on neurodiversity and disability and have more authentic media representation of neurodivergent and disabled people out here in India. But yeah, I mean, it's the community is growing, and we'd be happy to have you all on the community and learn more and grow together, sort of. And thanks so much for having me. Thanks for
Amazing.
having me.
Not at all. But yeah, continue your great work. I encourage everyone watching to go follow you and Much Spectrum and Much Media. So thank you very much for getting us started with the first ever Kaleidoscope podcast episode. Thank you all for watching. It's been a real pleasure, and follow us for more episodes. Thanks, Aditi. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more information about the work that Differing Minds do, please check out our website, www.differingminds.co.uk.